I'm excited. It's nice to be back, kind of getting back into the swing of things. Feels good. Feels good. So, slightly unrelated to everything. It's literally unrelated to anything stream-wise. I got two setups today. Made two sales. So, was a good day on top of a bad week. So, it kind of redeemed the week today, which is very nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I was getting. It was definitely like one of those, like, God, what the heck kind of weeks, but also at the beginning of the day, knowing, like, watch, you're gonna take it down to the wire, and then you're gonna come through, and I'm gonna feel like a jerk for being pissed. And sure enough, I had like the second biggest sale that I've ever done today, and then I got another one on top of that. So, God Infinity, Haze Zero. I feel like my video options are kind of janky.
Mine appears to be doing pretty well right now.
Good. Yeah, mine looks good. Make sure I'm not on my Wi-Fi at the house. I am. I'm going to turn that off. Run that specifically off a cell signal. So, honest to God, Spectrum Wi-Fi has been amazing. Like when we first got it set up, we had a couple outages that were a little concerning, but since then, like, I haven't had any like speed problems, haven't really had any significant lag. I've had a little bit of lag in Battlefront specifically, but I think it might be server side. But everything as far as streaming and stuff, I haven't really suffered any quality on that stuff. It always seems to be based on the computer rather than the connection itself. I've been pretty impressed. It's like $50 a month, and I've had like the best internet that I've ever had.
Hmm. Kind of funny because our internet providers go through cycles
Mm-hmm.
because like AT&T went through a thing not too long ago where they ended up, angering exactly everyone because they started sneaking in charges
Yeah.
into everyone's accounts. Um, and they had really inconsistent Wi-Fi. Like they had a lot of latency problems
Mm-hmm.
where the average internet speed would not be terrible. It would be somewhere between 60 and 80. But what it would look like when you ran your Wi-Fi test is it would bounce up to like 200 and then it would drop down to like 20
Mm-hmm.
and it would hold that cycle and sort of get in this weird buffering loop where it would lag behind and need to catch up.
Yeah.
And it was weird.
It
And
is.
so after that, like nobody wanted to use them for, that's to be expected. So
Yeah.
they went ahead, switched up all their wiring, came out with like new contracts. They I'm pretty sure they gave like everyone um, some sort of like promotional in this area
Mm-hmm.
so that they would be. It was before everyone was standard. I think like the standard is like 100, 200,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And they were the first ones to give everyone that standard here, just
Nice.
because otherwise they would have had no customers here.
Yeah.
Um, and now Charter, for some reason, is feeling really comfortable with themselves, so they have had the same like inconsistency issues, but luckily they haven't had hasn't been as bad
Mm-hmm.
as AT&T was, and they can't sneak in extra contracts or extra charges where I'm at because it's contracted through the whole apartment building, and the
Yeah.
landlord deals with that stuff.
Nice.
Yep. One of
I'm
the
not.
few benefits of renting.
Oh yeah. Oh hi Anakin. I'm not getting hardly any points though. I did take off Bounty Hunter star card because I'm playing consistently enough that I generally am making enough points, and I thought maybe I'd benefit more from actually having a gameplay perk. And overall, I haven't really noticed the difference, but right now I'm kind of feeling it.
I feel like this one,
I have to
I don't
worry about
know
kind of
like how
lagging.
late we dropped. I don't know how late we dropped in, but it feels pretty late. It also feels like there's some server side lag
We are
because I
actually,
know.
oof, we started off the game like with the cutscene, so we're in there with everybody else. But it does feel pretty laggy to me right now. I think it's got to be them because it's been pretty steadily on this game lately in particular.
I feel like that's a fair assessment. Yeah, I'm not even streaming. I'm just recording, and I'll probably edit it out. But you can see some of the players on the other teams. They're just, I don't know how to describe it. Shifty.
Yeah, it's one of those things like I'll get shot and nothing will happen, and then all of a sudden I'll be like very, very dead rather than
Hmm.
it almost seems like I'm getting insta killed.
Yeah, it's on my screen. I'm not catching anything like teleporting, so it's not so hectic
Mm-hmm.
that you can't accurately keep up with where they are on the battlefield. But I am seeing it's like they're vibrating in place,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
Um,
Oof. Ooh, we're losing. We are losing. Uh-oh. Hi, Anakin. That was weird. Anakin's voice just sounded like Darth Vader. Like it was like the tone sounded weird. Sounded like somebody pretending to be Darth Vader. Oh, hold on. I gotta change my sensitivity. That's better. Yep, so every time I go back and forth between a blaster character and a lightsaber character, I just swap my sensitivity.
That's fair. I mean, it makes a difference, so why not?
It does help.
I don't think I've seen a single one of our heroes, but we have max number in play.
I'm kind of off on the outskirts right now. Actually, hey, let's do this. Let me, because in it, hold on, just getting attacked. I don't think we're taking advantage of the flagging option that they recently released. Let's cap A. I just marked it. We just lost it as well.
Part of the issue is I keep spawning,
I'm about to die
like I
because
just
jumped
spawned
into a
in,
group. Yep. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
and you're good. So like I just spawned in, and it put me right in front of Yoda.
Oof.
I'm gonna spawn at D and see how that works for me.
I kind of jumped in the middle of that. I shouldn't have rushed in so hard. I overestimated my ability to kind of guerrilla warfare that. My sensitivity is still high, but I'm just going to try to stick with it. No, 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 don't quit, don't quit. I almost hit the wrong button. Ugh. Oh, there must be an event going on.
So
Reinforcements are, the Droideka is 100 points instead of 1,000.
the only downside to that is,
Everybody. Everybody.
yeah, everybody.
I know there's a limited amount,
Say-
but they're everywhere. Like commandos, and I'm seeing lots of jump troopers, commandos, and arc troopers.
Probably why this game mode feels so hectic, because you don't think about them being as powerful as they are, but they really make a difference, especially grouped up together, which is what I'm seeing. You'll see like, you know, a group of 3 and it'll be a commando, someone running some form of infiltrator class, and then someone else playing as a hero or something.
Yep. I just got stepped on even though I wasn't under his feet. That's rude. Yeah, commando droids are 200 points. Yeah, when they team up, it's pretty gnarly.
So are we streaming official? Like we're
Yep,
ready
we
to
are
discuss our
streaming.
topics?
It said we had 2 viewers a few minutes ago. One of them's me.
The other one is not me, in case you're wondering.
They're gone now, whoever it was. As grateful as I was for the time we spent together.
I just threw myself off a cliff by being overconfident with the rocket droid.
I just got wasted.
But, so I'll kickstart this with a little bit of a weird segue. But I was on Reddit the other day,
Oof.
and no, this is not a bad one. But what they were discussing on Reddit is what keeps you entertained when you check out a new streamer. Like, what are you looking for? What keeps you watching the stream if it's not someone you're familiar with and regularly watch? And the general consensus was that equivalent unanimously, there we go,
Interpreter.
that's a word I can say. Words are hard, man. But unanimously, they said that communication was the key, which I found interesting because there's several topics of streaming that don't involve communication with the viewer. And I think there might be a lot to be said about Reddit there. But I'll leave the psychoanalysis for later. But I do think the appeal of having a stream that is communicating and engaging with the audience, or just having something to discuss in general, does fit well with what we're trying to do. You know, part of what we do through gaming is fellowship. We've done that in the past. And providing an example of that, you know, when we get back into doing Bible study, and then providing, you know, some user engagement will, I think, help us connect with people. And so, yeah, that's sort of what made me think of that. And
Yeah,
we
that makes
don't
sense.
have, yeah, and we don't have Bible study together just yet. What we're discussing today is Star Wars. We've kind of touched on it, I think, in previous streams, but we're just gonna give it a more formal discussion about EA, some of the new games that are out, some of the new projects that EA has been working on and other companies have been working on. And yeah. So
I
the
just saw. I
first
just
one
watched Anakin murder you. Just so you know that I know.
yeah. He he chased me down so hard. I have it on video. I was trying to fly away from him and he just chased me on both sides of these droid carriers.
Rude.
And yeah, I feel, you know, discriminated against a little bit.
Yep. They don't serve our kind here.
But the first topic I had slated was about EA in this game. And I feel like most people know. A lot of people love to bash EA. And so I feel like a lot of people would be hyper aware of the failures of this game in its early stages. But for those that aren't, the main consensus was that this game felt like a pay-to-win game. You could unlock your rewards through several hours of grinding in PvP, or you could just pay for them.
Conceivably, even though that never actually ended up happening.
Yeah. And some of the complaints were excessive. Like, I remember I had unlocks and I didn't play this game regularly. I felt like there wasn't enough variety to it. And everyone's like, well, you've got to have at least 50 hours to have unlocked such and such. And I'm like, 10 into the game
Mm-hmm.
and was unlocking stuff. So some of it was exaggerated, but they did have some issues. They were really missing a lot of gameplay options as well as just variability in their game modes. And their market was based on microtransactions, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine because several other game companies do that, and they do it in various different ways. You know, they're not the first company to ask you to pay for new weapons
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that in PvP. Um, but yeah, so the reason why we're bringing up EA in this game though is because EA had turned it around, especially on this game, where the microtransactions, they're all cosmetic. They're adding, you know, free DLC, new maps, new game modes. Um, but there are still a lot of people who hate this game because this game is EA.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just wanted to bring that up and discuss it a little more formally to sort of just formalize our thoughts on it.
You know how I feel about that. Um, Most of the people that seem to hate the game are people who literally have never played it. Um, I know that I already kind of said it, and I probably sound like an apologist every time because obviously I like this game and I've played it since launch. Um, that whole pay to win cycle never actually even occurred in the official launch of the game. They had I don't know if you want to call it the beta or the early release, but during the beta, I think they gave you the ability to buy stuff, but game officially launched, they had already taken out the microtransactions altogether, and then by the time they reintroduced them, it was strictly with cosmetics. So it was one of those things where, in a sense, it was a really big success story kind of for the gaming industry because the free market worked. Like a certain service was offered, people didn't like that service. They vocalized that they didn't like it and they refused to give it their business. And the content provider changed their approach to fit the demands of the market. So that was a really good thing. But just the backlash behind that is the fact that the gaming industry did that. And since the gaming industry doesn't know how to be positive about anything, it's almost just like they threw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead of just being like, yeah, we made a difference, it was more like, oh, yeah, they're the empire and we defeated them. And it's just like, okay, you guys collectively just complained and that made a difference with a manufacturer or a distributor because they wanted to make money. So, congratulations, you did the right thing. Now that it's meeting the demands of the market, people are so caught up in like this weird spirit of revenge that they're just like, oh, I'm not going to support them, even though they literally said, hey, we care about our consumers and we hear you, so we're going to change according to what you're saying you want. So I think it was pretty clearly an EA decision to have the microtransactions take place. And then we heard that it was Disney that kind of called EA and told them, hey, turn this off. And so EA had to, and then that decision has been rewarded slowly over time with increased popularity and a long-standing, initially small, loyal player base who's now become a very large player base. And this is stuff that we've talked about, but up to the point where IGN literally released a second review cycle on the game just because of all the new content. They consider it, as far as their review format is concerned, as an entirely different game from what it initially launched as. And I think they gave it an 8 out of 10, which is their rating for great. So, yeah, gaming industry's toxic. Even when the toxic community does something right, they don't even know how to acknowledge that they did something right. And that's my spiel.
Yeah, no. And it is really weird because so one of the to use an example, Bungie and EA was partnered with Bungie for a little bit until Bungie decided that they wanted to be independent and
Are you thinking of Activision? Or are you talking like before that happened?
I might be thinking of Activision.
Oh yeah, I think
So
I think
scratch
that's
that.
Activision.
You're probably right. No.
Nice.
Well, the example still works though,
Mm-hmm.
because Bungie receives the some of the most negative social media feedback of any game,
Mm-hmm.
where regularly the issues that are trending are not positive. They have had two trending moments for something good over the last, I'd say 6 months, but I think it's really the last about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And what those moments were charity events.
Oh.
And of course they always get, yeah. And of course they do always get good feedback when they release content,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in this weird cycle where they release content, everyone plays it for a week. It'll be the most streamed content for a week as well. You'll see
That's
it
right.
all over
Yeah.
Twitch, Mixer. It is leading the charts, but only for a week at a time. And
Right.
the reason why it's only for a week is because the content isn't long standing. There are issues with it, there are bugs, there are balancing issues, and what Destiny is a loot grind.
That's right.
And I love Destiny. It's not, I'm not saying that like it's a bad game. It's still got some of the best gameplay mechanics I think out of any game that exists right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have those issues, and those issues are always trending on their Reddit feed, their Twitter feed. The past 2, 3 weeks, they've been trending because they can't fix bugs in their system. They
Ooh.
tried to patch it, a weapon, because it was overpowered,
Yeah.
and in trying to patch it, they made it one-shot supers.
Oh.
So that's beyond overpowered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like, despite those issues, people will still give them money. People will complain, but people will still go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas EA has never received that level of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why EA fixed this game is because this game was not generating the revenue that they needed to continue with the game. And it's easier to patch and fix a game than it is to scrap it and re-release. And it
Mm-hmm.
really is this sort of just like toxicity. It's so weird to think of the gamer community as behaving in something close to a monolithic manner, because they're not monolithic.
Right.
People have
Pretty diverse
different
crowd of
games.
people. Yeah.
Hmm. But at the same time, they do behave in this manner where their decisions to support certain creators will just be biased, like, as a community. You know,
Yeah.
EA really gets the short end of the stick, because if something goes wrong, like take Anthem. Anthem had a campaign that I think was about as long as Fallen Orders, and it's weird because Fallen Order was EA.
Yeah,
Most
that's right.
people just treated it like it wasn't because they knew that who was it, Respawn
Yep.
was the one that created and spent most of the work on it. So they treated it as if it weren't EA, even though it was EA. So Anthem is prettier than Fallen Order. I don't think the storyline holds up as much as Fallen Order, if I'm being honest. I don't think the gameplay does either. But I think that Fallen Order was also a great game. Do you remember off the top of your head what its reviews were?
9 out of 10,
Didn't it
across,
get a
pretty much across the
yeah
board.
9 out of 10?
Yep.
Yeah, that game was phenomenal, and to have some aspects that are better um, than a 9 out of 10 game. Really good campaign. It's a solid storyline. It's not quite as good,
Hmm.
but it's still a lot of fun. And to unanimously be hated because the there were some bugs, some quality of life stuff that they listened to. They got patches out, immediately. They were out before the early access. If you were an Origin Premier
Hmm.
subscriber, which I was, then you got to play it a week before everyone else. And they had some patches rolled out within the first week.
Wow, that's pretty
And
good.
yeah, that is. Even with that level of feedback, of getting back to the gamers and really taking care of their interests, that game is still known as one of the greatest market failures. They made almost, I'm pretty sure they didn't make a profit off of it, actually. They
Yeah.
lost money on it, and they're still putting money into it. They still want it to be, a good game.
Hmm.
But just so funny to see how gamers hold this grudge towards EA. But I think when it comes to this game, um, luckily they've been able to bring back some of the gaming community. IGN giving them a good review is a good thing. It's got a
Hmm.
lot going for it. And I have seen less complaints and more interaction from the actual fan base. And so it's actually, when I've interacted with it, I haven't spent as much time going through and browsing the reviews and the social media. Um, so I don't have as comprehensive a review as I do for other games.
Hmm.
But anytime I've interacted with it, the community just seems really excited for, the product that they've released and what's coming next.
Yep.
Seems to be a really, really nice fan base, which is always something you want to be able to say about the Star Wars fan
Yeah.
base and
Yeah.
often can't.
Well, and I've also noticed that it was kind of like a slow crawl because I've been a lot less active on Reddit the last like month or so, but I was pretty active specifically for Battlefront 2 and Jedi Fallen Order. And then I was also pretty active when
Hmm.
Spider Man was still getting ready to come out, just because you're starving for content, and Reddit's pretty amazing for that because whether it's articles or screenshots or memes or anything, it always ends up in the same place. So it's really easy to find news and just conversation. But at any rate, it was pretty consistently like negative, I'd say about a year ago. And then right around when all the Clone Wars content started coming out, you didn't even really like notice the shift until all of a sudden it happened. Like everybody was kind of, as you're saying, a lot more optimistic, a lot more excited about where the game was potentially going to go, and then where we saw that it did end up going. Like it ended up being a legitimate success story, and the attitude, you see that change reflected in the attitude of the gaming community as well. And sometimes it's almost like a chicken and the egg sort of thing, or chicken or the egg, because you would see a lot of comments targeted towards the developers or even just the community managers, excuse me, on Reddit. You'd see them kind of fielding a lot of negative comments, accusations, personal attacks, just being like, what the heck are you guys doing? You're just sitting on your butts, da 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 da. And the developers were like pretty forthcoming. They're just like, listen, we say that meaning that we are working really hard, and we'd love to have you along for the ride, but you don't have to stay if you don't want to. Like, I'm paraphrasing pretty heavily, but seeing the actual effect that that environment, I guess digital environment, is having on actual humans who are passionate about the game and who love Star Wars and who wanted to make a Star Wars game. It's been pretty interesting. But now all that stuff is pretty much turned around. I'm sure there's still negative comments, but it's been really cool to see a complete kind of title shift, not just with the attitude of the game itself, but also just the momentum that the game is having on the development side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I do like is, do you know off the top of your head if this was made in the same game engine as the first one?
No,
Because they kind of scrapped
it
they
wasn't.
scrapped the first one and switched to this, and it's been cool to see the amount of changes that they've been able to bring, because that's an area where other games have struggled, where the community will demand something and they'll get a response back, something along the lines of, that's impossible in this game engine, we understand that this is an issue, but like we can only use like this set of mechanics or this set of aesthetics. It's really hard to upload into the game engine itself. And I don't know, I feel like with this game they knew to keep going on it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because they could have scrapped it,
Yeah.
and there have been some games where they have been scrapped and they shouldn't have been. They might have just needed some tweaking. And there have been games like Destiny is another good example where it honestly should have been scrapped. Destiny 3 should be out. If they weren't profiting off of microtransactions, Destiny 3 probably would be out. They would probably devote a lot of resources to it. Just because this was, I think, before, actually it might have been after, because they had some complaints about Activision that led to their split. And
right.
ultimately, they never openly said it, but ultimately they kind of blamed their inability to push out quality content on the burnout and deadlines that Activision had them under. And so with Activision out of the picture, that was no longer an excuse they could use. And so they responded to a lot of people in the community to explain that now that Activision is gone, the actual issue is the game engine. And they're talking about how it takes months just to get, a new character drawn and loaded into a game, from idea board
Oh
to
wow.
something you'll see in the game. And this is without their audio, um, or anything like that. It's not like completely done, just the aesthetics, months. They were talking about how, because people were tired of stomp mechanics, and they said that they basically couldn't not do stomp mechanics.
Oof.
They said that they had to, all of their boss mechanics were limited to some very basic moves
Hmm.
and stuff like that. Um, and so that's one of those things where for sure they probably should have looked into maybe just cutting that game.
Hmm.
But they managed to turn it around just because, partially because the community is so forgiving there.
Hmm.
Something that EA doesn't have.
Yeah.
But the fact that EA was able to listen to the consumer and put out such a good product, um, and win back the consumer by having such a good product is pretty cool, especially since it's Star Wars.
Hmm.
I feel like it would be less excited if it were Apex Legends or something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's pretty much. I don't think I have anything to say new on that. That would just be rehashing what I've already said.
Hmm. Well, I think something that is important to point out, and it's going to sound like backtracking, but maybe just clarification, is I think that like EA has like definitely earned a lot of the ire that it has gotten from the community, but I
Oh yeah,
think,
for sure.
yeah, I think that what the gaming community needs is a little more pragmatism, and also just that for the sake of just like a healthy community in general. Um, I guess the same thing that you would require out of like a regular human relationship. Like if there's a problem, you call out the problem, and if you need to protest, protest. If you need to address something, like the squeaky wheel does get fixed. But like when the squeaky wheel is fixed, like forgiveness needs to be a thing if you want any sort of relationship to succeed. And I think that needs to be the case with companies like this. And so a lot of people will be like, oh, well, forgiveness is earned. And maybe in terms of like a corporation or a business, sure, yeah, I guess. But um, if you want to have any sort of healthy environment for communities to thrive in, eventually you have to remember that you're dealing with human relationships, and you have to put in some of those necessary ingredients that actual relationships would require to succeed. So, like, when the gaming community fixes a problem, we need to acknowledge that they fixed the problem, and then essentially like move on. Like, you know, yeah, I don't know how to boil it down any simpler than that. I don't mean it to be like wishy-washy as in like, oh, we need to all hold hands with Electronic Arts, because again, they earned that disapproval. But if you want to not be like the worst Reddit page on the planet, which Battlefront has an awesome Reddit page, I'm not saying that specifically, but just in general, if you want to have any sort of healthy community, we've got to get over things, because so much of the things that can be good things end up just becoming kind of a fad, and it's like a skin deep fad that if anybody's paying attention, they can recognize like, oh, this is a hate train. That's what this is. It's not necessarily here are my logical reasons for having this problem with this company. Um, when the problem's been dealt with, it's been addressed and corrected. At some point, you need to realize like you might be acting like a lemming just because the internet is a cesspool of emotional outrage. Um, yeah, and there it is.
No, I feel like that's good way to
Dang it.
sort of consolidate the message that we're the lesson to EA's story. Um, I'm gonna say a lot because I can't not.
But
But yeah, no, there needs to be forgiveness, and EA really shows the benefit to forgiveness because it's a game, it's a form of entertainment.
yeah.
It's, you know, if you're missing out on fun because of a problem that they've fixed, that's not on them,
Yep.
you know. And even in, you know, different situations, not being able to forgive is more of a burden on you than the person that you're not forgiving.
Yep. I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head that I was trying to find, and I couldn't find a way to it. Um, it being more of a burden on you. That's what I was kind of getting at with like, hey, this is a toxic community and nobody likes to be here because all you guys do is repeat what everybody was saying 6 months ago about issues that have already been addressed. I think, yeah, it's a burden on the gaming community when the gaming community is just going to be pissed off about everything all the time. I definitely lost that tank battle, like very, very badly. Really close.
So I don't know how to. I feel like it's a good idea, but using Battlefield as a comparison there is very similar to Battlefield. Mhm. Battlefield has no teamwork, even though it should. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. That's exactly what I'm doing. That's funny.
Is there a way to hit F on Xbox?
Unfortunately, no.
Tragic.
But oh yeah, Battlefield. So kind of going on a tangent here. Um, I've been playing that a little bit. I think that it's very similar to this, but it does have a few nicer touches to it that make it feel a little bit smoother than this game is. Though at the same time, I do like how Star Wars keeps it T for teen.
Yeah.
You know, um, like typically when I play Battlefield, I have to like turn the volume down because people will just like be shouting out for like help or saying cuss words, and it's like that's terrible. What if I were streaming?
I meant to hit Anakin.
But
Dang it. That's okay.
I hate to see it.
I'm right behind you with the commando as well.
Nice. The Commando's so good. This is actually my first time playing a game primarily as Commando, and I've been enjoying it.
It's a lot of fun. I feel like the enforcement should always be cheap like this. Like, there's obviously not like a huge problem with lack going on. I don't feel like it's overly I don't feel like it's a problem to just let us not pay half the price of a hero character for somebody who has barely more health than a heavy trooper. Just my 2 cents.
I really focus into the game. So, since we're keeping it Star Wars theme in our discussions, Fallen Order is a game.
It is a
I've
game.
enjoyed it. Honestly, some of the best combat mechanics I think that have come out in just about any game, period. I just feel like that should be the model. They can fine tune a little bit, but that should be the model for being a Jedi from here on out.
I agree. It needs to be a pretty solid template, and they need to keep building off of it until the end of time. Oh, my points are not doing well. I think it's weird how I always get way less points as an enforcer than just like a regular assault trooper.
Yeah, it does feel a little weird. As for the story, though, I kind of wanted there to be more to it.
Like just more content or what?
Yeah, a little bit more. I feel so in the story, you gather characters, you learn about them, and you sort of connect with them to some degree, but they never end up being like companion characters in the same way that you had in some of the older games like Knights of the Old Republic. And they only ever fight with you in specific boss fights. You know, I forget her name.
Yeah, what's her face with the
name
Dark
of the
Jedi?
planet.
Yep, Dathomir.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they save you from Vader at the end there. But I feel like the characters were good enough for them to sort of take it further. I feel like the ending was good. I feel like some of the dialogue felt a little like cliche, you know. But it was a good ending. It was a happy ending. But at the end of it, it just felt sort of rushed, and it felt like isn't it canon? Like it feels
Yeah,
like there
it's
should
canon.
be more to their story, just because of where it falls in place in the timeline. And I would be okay with them making cameos later on, you know? Um, like maybe they go into exile, maybe they don't, I don't know. I don't really know what the follow-up is there.
Yeah. How
I
did
just
that?
want more of it. It was a very engaging campaign. I think that it had a lot going for it, from the variation in combat, like even among similar troopers. So like Purge troopers have, what is it, 3 or 4 different types?
I want to say 3.
I think it's 4.
Is it? We got the
So
staff, we got the
yeah.
dual batons, and the gun guy. Oh, and the axe. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And each of them have a unique fighting style that makes the experience of fighting them different.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, man. I just enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it
It
too.
felt, it felt close to when we were playing through For Honor, where like we would love a Star Wars game
Yep.
that felt like For Honor. I feel like it's the closest Star Wars has gotten. Um, and I feel like with I want to say escalation is a good word for it, of your powers and fighting styles, your character doesn't feel it doesn't feel like using the same character over and over again as you progress through the storyline. You have more and more options for how to fight, and I think that was a good model for the game. Trying to think if there's some major theme to the end of the story that I could pull in, but I actually think the most touching part of the story wasn't the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was when they sat down and had their discussion about moving beyond failure.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Feels almost like another um, forgiveness
I know.
discussion.
I was gonna say, do you think EA wrote that conversation?
Yes,
um,
EA was just sort of feeling introspective when they made the game.
um, 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 um. Well, what you're saying about like more story and feeling like there needed to be more stuff, I think it's pretty obvious that they're gonna do a sequel. Obviously, just for monetary benefit, the game was a huge success. Commercially, it was great. Review wise, it was great, and seems like a pretty wide open cliffhanger. I mean, we know that there has to be some sort of resolution since they're in the dark time and there's supposedly no active Jedi left when Luke Skywalker kind of has his rise. I see what I did there. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear they're going to at least make a trilogy out of it, which I fully support. I want more.
Hmm.
And I want them to have multiplayer features in the next one for dueling and co-op because I think co-oping would just be the freaking bee's knees. Um, speaking of, sort of speaking, I definitely still think that they need to do a new Game Plus mode. I think they probably will because there's pretty much universal demand for it. And I would really like it if they went some sort of route, weirdly enough, that Force Unleashed took, where they let you download skins and you pretty much have some sandbox outside of the storyline where they're just like, okay, you beat the story, the campaign's over, we're just going to let you play in all of these levels with your favorite characters. And you could literally like be Chewbacca with a lightsaber running around, or a stormtrooper, or Darth Vader, or Luke. I think that is just something that is a moral obligation that they need to do for this game, where the more time I have to play this game and then the more ways I have to play it, um, it's obviously just what needs to happen and they need to do it. And if they don't, I'm going to start a Reddit page about how EA is the worst and undo everything that I said.
No, so I completely forgot about the Force Unleash. Not as a game, just the extra game modes they had,
Yep.
where it was like they had like time trial. They had one that was literally they had a similar deflection mechanism, and it was you were standing on two different platforms,
Mm-hmm.
and you would deflect the shots back at them as far as you can go. Um, it was just, it came in waves, and I think the waves were infinite.
Uh-huh.
hmm and it was actually less forgiving than Fallen Order when it came to some of the, trying to think, options for deflection. So I remember that I feel like the AT-ATs would not deflect, they would track you and have a larger AoE than what you had in Fallen Order. They would track you in Fallen Order, but you could outrun them, you know. They weren't so threatening that you had to block every single one of them. Whereas with not Fallen Order,
Force
man,
Unleashed.
words are hard. Yeah, that one. You definitely, it was a challenge. And they could add sort of like sandbox difficulty changes, you know what I mean? Um, that's something that a lot of games have done where it's like new rules apply as you go up certain rounds, and it's like maybe the tracking is more intense, maybe the um parry has to be perfect once you get high enough, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even harder than Grandmaster and stuff like that. But one thing I do think they should do, so for the next game, co-op should be a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they could do it is have you use side characters, so you're not going to have like four of the main character running around. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like, you know, go to like a character selection screen. One of you gets to be the main character. One of you gets to be the person from Dathomir. You know,
Yep. One of you gets to be Grease, and you just get to follow around and complain. It's great. That'll be fun. He could be like a support class. Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
yeah,
That could be great.
like
Obviously, Seer would be another
there's a way
like
better.
melee combatant with her some range attacks sort of in because she has her lightsaber and her pistol combos, which is legit.
hmm So I feel really bad. I already told you about it, but I'm gonna bring it up again. Um, just because I found new and enlightening information on the topic.
Mm,
So I've typically always gone with my own build for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic because it feels broken. It's basically just force buffs and melee.
okay.
And the character has no force powers because literally everything will resist force powers, especially if it applies its own force buffs.
Yeah.
You know, you basically have to establish a rotation of using Force Breach anytime they buff themselves
Okay.
and then doing your attacks. And it's just, yeah, it's a more difficult way of playing and it's a little rough. Or you could just get the biggest sword you can find and just go off, which is what I always do
Yeah.
because the benefit to that is you can run a strength, dexterity, no, not dexterity, a strength, intelligence, and charisma
Mm-hmm.
build, and then you don't have to worry about combat, even constitution, because you can tank everything, you can max out your strength, um, just by like finding items. There are a lot of strength bonus items if you're dark side, which I never am. But if you decide to be, you get a strength bonus once you reach max dark side.
Okay.
And yeah, so you actually, through some of the upgrades you find, are able to do everything in the game because you have max um, skills from intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and running an intelligence build, and you have all of these different feats, so you can roll pass on any persuade that you need to. You can upgrade HK all the way
Mm-hmm.
because you can like max out your repair. And it's just always how I've done it. It's a little more effective in Knights of the Old Republic 2 because you have more levels and you just are more overpowered in Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Okay.
But it's still fun in the first one as well. You can still make it work. What I did this time though is it was the highest rated build that I could find on Reddit.
Okay.
And what I didn't check was where this build was from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from the PC version. The PC version has a few extra pieces that aren't available on the Xbox version.
Oh.
And I also didn't level save on um, the character I made for my wife because she's going through her first playthrough of it. So she's going through her first playthrough of it um, with less force powers than she needs because she didn't level save, as well as just the most potato class because it doesn't have skills, it has like no persuade, and it's supposed to thrive on force powers, but because she leveled up on the first planet more than she needed to, she doesn't have any force powers. And so typically I go through the game, I do everything because you can do everything with the way I normally build it. But I trusted the internet too much. They said it was a lot of fun. And so she's playing through her first time, being unable to persuade anyone of anything
Oh.
or complete basic computer tasks without using like 20 of the
Spikes.
computer spikes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oof.
it's so bad. And the benefit is that you're supposed to have all of these force powers, and she doesn't,
Oh.
you know. But no, I have not enjoyed it because it is. I created a character for myself with the same build, and it is a very slow build. So your character is much weaker
Mm-hmm.
than what they would be if they had just gone with like a strength build. And I mean, I'm still having fun with it,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't come together until you find all of the sort of pieces and components you need. Like you need specific um, headpieces and crystals and stuff like that, and I don't have them yet. So it's one of those things where I can see the end goal. My character, I've just gotten my third. Um, can't remember what they're called. Star maps. There we go. And my character is just now feeling strong, which is almost exactly halfway through the game. But it's really not going to come together completely until I establish, until I level up like 4 more times and find 1 or 2 more of the components that I'm missing. And part of the build is, so when you played Knights of the Old Republic, did you play it with the DLC for the orbital station around Yavin, or is that going to be new to you?
It sounds familiar, but it was so many years ago that I did a full playthrough that I just don't even know.
Yeah, so for me, it is definitely new.
Okay.
And the way it works is you visit it the first time. I typically visit him after each and every planet because he will, if you need to sell stuff, he will buy it for a much higher price
Oh, cool.
than anyone else in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And when you visit him the first time, he has some good equipment for like your side characters, or if you're doing like, what is it, a scout? Then he'll have some decent stuff for you.
Okay.
But other than that, nothing too much going on. You visit him again after you have collected 2-star maps, and he has legitimately the strongest sword in the game.
Oh.
I think you can, it's, you know, not better than running a lightsaber, but for your side characters, like I think I threw it on Canderous.
Yeah.
Because I typically use him on the Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has some good stuff there. But the third time you visit him after you've collected all of the star maps, and you'll fight some people and save him, and he'll, you know, offer you different stuff in his collection after that. And one of the things he offers you, he has 2 new lightsaber crystals,
Nice.
and they're super cool additions. So they actually change the color of your lightsaber. One of them is like this really light blue,
Okay.
and this other one is like a deep orange.
Cool.
So that's cool. What else is cool about it? It will change the buffs that you get from your in-game crystals that buff your lightsabers when you pair them together. And so it can give them an upgrade that help you as like a force user. I haven't gone through all of them. IGN actually put together a list of what the different ones do, and they can pair really well with a bunch of different builds, and it's been kind of cool to just sort of go through and investigate that and put together a build.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, essentially, until I have all of the star maps and am able to buy those crystals from that character, I'm not going to be like maxed out on any relevant stats. So it's like my character isn't a potato because you kind of get to this point where you level out of being a potato even if you've built a weak class. I have enough levels to where I'm good. I can just sort of AoE everything, but you can tell that with the stats that I have currently compared to the stats that supposedly get, according to the website, that it's going to be broken by the end of it. But you spend most of the game with this very difficult to work with class.
Huh.
I think my favorite class, yeah, it's kind of weird. I think my favorite class is still, if you're not going to do the strength
Nice
class, this is sort of like a variation on the strength class where you can find like various crystals and upgrades and stuff that will multiply the range of your critical shots. So it works like Dungeons and Dragons, you know? The computer is essentially rolling a dice 1 through 20, and if you roll high enough, it'll be a critical shot, and you can stack different crystals that will double the range within which you can roll a critical shot,
Oh.
and you pair that with the critical attack, because that I think also doubles it. I'll have to look back at the stats on it,
Okay.
and it's like when it hits, it also stuns them as well. So you basically spend the whole game almost one-shotting people, and if they're not one-shot, then you're stunning them, and just bashing them while they're stunned. But you can couple that with stealth attack, which is something that scouts get, and that doubles the amount of damage you do to incapacitated characters or characters that can't see you. And so anytime you hit them while they're stunned
Let's back
off
out.
of your critical shot, yeah, then you're doing double the damage on it. And the reason why I'm kind of going on this tangent, because I realized very late that I'm going on a tangent, is that we're going to be streaming Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2. And so it's good to sort of think about what classes we want to do for streaming purposes. Like, this would honestly be a terrible class to stream because I can't show the viewers the full extent of what's possible when you can't pass all of your persuasion checks or repair anything, you know?
Sounds rough.
So I'm glad I kind of wasn't streaming that when I went through it. But
I'm gonna
yeah,
grab
it's a
water
good
while you
game.
talk.
Cool. So I'll just go over what Knights of the Old Republic is. So Knights of the Old Republic came out, what was it, 2003? Maybe a little before that.
Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere around there.
But it was on the original Xbox, and it immediately became popular with fans of Star Wars games because it was a new and original story, far removed from the timeline that the movies was in. So it is about, man, I don't want to guess wrong, but I think it was 4,000 years before
That's right.
the Galactic Republic. But what you're unearthing during this time is 20,000 years before that. So it really expands the time frame for Star Wars lore, and because of that, it had an immediate, you know, following, and it had a really good story to it as well. Um, I feel like most people would have heard of it, even if they haven't played the game. If not, I'm not gonna give a full lecture on the storyline because it actually covers quite a lot in the story, but it covers the story of Revan, and I'll be doing a light through, or if you do it, I suggest a light side playthrough. One, because I don't want to be the baddie. Two,
Hmm.
because that's what was canon before Disney got a hold and sort of axed all of canon.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure
But
they're gonna keep
it's
that as canon since they're reintroducing Revan. I mean, it's pretty much set in stone that if they do bring him back in any official capacity, pretty sure it's just gonna be a retelling of the same story. He's
I hope so,
he's too
honestly.
iconic to mess with, I think.
I think so as well. Um, but I feel like maybe they shouldn't mess with that story, but there is a story to Revan before the story that you play,
Yeah, the
which is the
Mandalore.
Mandalorian Wars.
Mhm.
Yeah, and his sort of clash, I guess you could say, with Mandalore the Great. And I feel like one, that would be such good show or movie material.
Who the hell?
And going off on all sorts of tangents. So we'll discuss this the fact that they're bringing Revan back into canon later. But the game is sort of Dungeons and Dragons based. It uses a similar skill progression, skill set, and it is based on an RNG roll of 20 that the in-game computer just does for you.
Hmm.
And it just follows a storyline where you get a bunch of character options, where you can investigate, you know, what's going on. A lot of them will fill you in on different lore behind different planets, different events that are happening. So there's actually a lot to investigate. And yeah, so it's a real fun, kind of simple game. I think a lot of people don't think of those types of games as being as fun as they are because it is RNG, it is turn-based fighting, but it's still a whole lot of fun. And if you have never played it before, 10 out of 10
Hmm.
would recommend. It's pretty iconic if you're a Star Wars fan.
Super good, and the storyline was freaking amazing. I mean, somebody spoiled the end before I ever ended up playing it. If they didn't spoil it, like, even with it having been spoiled, I was like, oh my gosh, this game is so good. Like, such an original storyline. It's fantastic. Oh my gosh, I'm not playing well right now at all. I just keep getting like picked off on the corners that I don't check. And when I do check corners, I'll still get sniped out of the trees and stuff.
I was playing really bad until I got the, what are they called? Death Troopers? And now I'm
Purge
doing pretty
troopers?
well.
Oh, Death Trooper, yeah, that's right. But yeah.
I just keep getting picked off by snipers.
Yep, they're up on the cliffs. I'm gonna actually try to focus on some of them. Now I can't find them. Oof. killed Leia.
Walker coming online. The rebels have their weapon. Withdraw and prepare to defend.
Can that guy even... Dude, you're an enforcer, Bobo. You can't even grab this stuff. Apparently I can't either right now, but... Get out of my face, bro. I got the thing.
Directed toward our base. I want it intercepted before it arrives. Use the rebels' tactics against them. Arm with rockets and fire on the walker.
Oh, of course I get single shotted by the AT-AT. Dang it. Like, totally ignores me, and then the one... He shoots 2 shots at me, and the second one hits me and just wastes me.
So, yeah, I feel like there's a lot we could sort of bounce around idea-wise when it comes to Knights of the Old Republic. The first game is actually sort of linear to some degree.
I was sighing because I got hit by mortar shells. Even though I made it out of the
It's okay.
attachment.
I fell out of the trees with the rocket and died.
Nice.
Just landed right in front of it.
Noted.
Yeah, everyone keeps trying to pick up the rocket launcher that I dropped and just getting wasted because it's in such a bad spot. I feel I feel really bad about that on some level.
It's probably your fault. And the game probably hits you. What?
I can't even remember everything. Oh god, voice cracked. We'll edit that out. Can't even remember everything about Knights of the Old Republic 2. Because that game has so much. They were a little too ambitious. They didn't actually finish it.
That is true.
But they still released it and everyone still loved it.
Crossing checkpoint 1.
But I feel like that's actually going to be good material just for like discussion because it has a lot of philosophy and there's sort of this most of the philosophy is about the Force and we can sort of ignore that, but they do have one character that's I guess the best way to describe her is she's kind of jaded almost. I don't know, she has this very pessimistic viewpoint where she doesn't think that you should do evil or anything like that, but she doesn't think that you should go out of your way to do good.
That's not
And
Kreia
I
that you're
just
talking
feel
about, is
like-
it?
It is.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and then her philosophy of the Force ends up being evil, and everything ends up confusing.
Yeah,
The
I was
most
gonna say I
memorable
can never
one-
tell what the heck she was talking about because it's just always she seems like she's all over the place. She's just always mad no matter what I do.
The most memorable one is if you've ever tried both options on Nar Shaddaa. So on Nar Shaddaa, some comes up to you begging for money. Now, if you choose the good option to give him money, she berates you for it and says that it's bad because your good ended up causing evil. The guy ends up getting robbed because he has money on him. And if you choose the bad option, he ends up going and robbing someone else because, he doesn't have money on him.
Right.
And so it kind of puts you in this sort of bad situation where she's arguing. I don't know, you're sort of stuck in this situation where no matter what you do, you're going to get berated for it. But the sort of underlying philosophy is kind of like pessimism to some degree. She just believes that it's going to be bad no matter, like, and it doesn't ever discuss the morality very well in depth. It's also sort of utilitarian. Like, the reason why it's bad that you helped him is because it yielded a bad result. But it's like, you didn't do anything bad by helping him.
Yeah.
So I feel like some of the moral issues, and I can't remember all of them. That's honestly the only one I remember, just because the Star Wars community memed it for being so annoying that no matter what dialogue choice you make, you're going to lose influence with Kreia there.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep. She's always going to berate you.
And then she tries to murder.
And yep. And so I feel like anytime she tries to discuss morality, it gives good conversation fuel to basically just discuss why she's wrong.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like that one
Wait,
I feel like that one will be more engaging than Knights of the Old Republic 1.
that one's a bit more
but-
cut and dry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There-
they're
there's-
good, and when you
There's some stuff about like whether the ends justify the means and stuff like that, because the guys who are supposed to be good definitely do some morally questionable things because they feel like it gets justified. We could explore the problems with pacifism, and then
Mhm.
the consequential. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in both of those games. Now that I'm thinking about it, whether Revan was
Mhm.
right initially in his campaign against the Mandalorians, if the outcome, because it led to the outcome that it did, or whether he was right all along, because with the follow-ups that they did in like Star Wars: The Old Republic, you're finding out what happened to him in the Outer Rim or the Unknown Regions.
Yeah, no, I feel like the major issue that has always existed in Star Wars was actually the philosophy of the Force. And I feel like Knights of the Old Republic 1, if you follow up in your investigations about Revan, because you can just ignore the dialogue and the history of Revan to a certain extent if you so choose to. But if you decide to investigate, he went to war to protect people,
Yep.
not evil. And Star Wars always sort of has this weird binary, and they can never figure it out. So
No, they really can't.
George
George Lucas was the worst at it.
Lucas, when he initially started it, he was pulling heavily from
In position, ready to breach the base.
Eastern
Yeah.
philosophy, and
The rebels
Eastern philosophy can occasionally be incoherent. I'm not going to talk too much on that, though William Lane Craig did have a question of the week on it recently, which I find funny, where he basically argued that someone got a question about it, and he basically argued that some of their beliefs were incoherent.
Okay, go down.
But yeah,
Okay.
so I started this conversation, but man, can I not finish it because I don't know how to frame the good versus bad. I think the major issue they had was their confusion over pacifism. And in the movies, Jedi weren't pacifists, they were actually warriors for good. And actually, it's sort of come to me now. There was always this sort of confusion, not really confusion. It's drawing directly from some of the Eastern religions, Buddhism and stuff like that, where passions are viewed as negative, and there's not any good passions, which we disagree with as, I don't know, Christians for one, but most of the West will disagree with that because clearly, your desire to help people isn't morally wrong. Your desire to defend isn't evil. It's stuff like that. And they would argue on some level that even those passions can be wrong to some degree. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of fuel there because Revan goes to war to protect people and ends up falling to the dark side because he wasn't a pacifist. And it's so weird, and it's almost something they need to touch on a little bit since they're planning on reintroducing Revan, because he was never portrayed as an arrogant character. He was never an Exar Kun, even though a lot of
Right.
people sort of like to pretend that he was. Exar Kun has a similar story. He was arrogant. He tried to fight the galaxy. Galaxy won, which makes sense. One guy versus the galaxy was pretty bad math.
Oh my gosh.
But Revan sought to save the galaxy and then came back with an army to conquer it, like a few years later. And there's a lot to sort of break down there as to maybe trying to come up with a coherent idea as to why they say that happens.
Yeah,
sort
Drew
of.
Karpyshyn tried to, and he kind of did, but I think no matter what, it's going to be a little disjointed and hard to flesh out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's part of the thing when it comes to Star Wars, I don't hate that they will take away canon, because sometimes it can feel bad. Like, Revan's our favorite character. We clearly want him to be canon, but it's like, when you investigate it further, some of your favorite characters and favorite stories are not well thought out, especially in Star Wars,
Yep.
which is just unfortunate. I don't know. I hope they do what Marvel did, except they have sort of a smoother process for it, because Marvel sat down and established a timeline, and there are some things that they sort of started and scrapped because it wasn't doing as well as they had hoped. like the um, Black Widow and Hulk thing that they had going for a little bit
Mm-hmm.
was one of them. The entire uh, tone of the Thor movies got completely rewritten in the third one,
Right.
um, as well as in Endgame. They rewrote his character to be more comedic, which on some level I didn't like. And
Well, everyone else disagrees with you, which interestingly enough leads into another Star Wars topic later on. But carry on. Namely
But-
Taika Waititi.
but oh no, I still like him. He does well. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the low point that Thor hit.
Oh
You
yeah.
know?
What I meant
I'm
with
not-
namely Taika Waititi, with the announcement that Star Wars wants him to direct. I don't know if it was an entire trilogy or another
yeah.
Star Wars movie. They just announced that, or somebody announced that this week. And he also did 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. He did the first and the last episode of the season.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna throw out the Marvel conversation. I'm sure everyone knows what I'm getting at. They should establish a roadmap and sort of just fix their canon, pretty basic stuff. And we should talk about how perfect he would be to direct a movie about like bounty hunters.
Oh,
Some sort
yeah.
of like snarky, funny. You know what I mean?
Yep, that's actually a
Like they're
great.
not super serious.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Um, either that or if you were going to give him like a gray Jedi, because gray Jedi are going to be controversial. I think he could make them work by making them funny.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
I agree. That makes a
Like
lot of sense.
a Jolie Bendo type character.
Mhm.
He was he was a good guy, but he just spent most of his time avoiding having to deal with everyone's problem because he was an old Jedi who was just tired of it. I feel like that could be more comedic than it was. I
That's
feel
a
like
good
no matter
point.
what he does, it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
He's shown that he is able to put together some really good movies, some movies that are funny but actually like touching on some level, despite the fact that they're basically comedies.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see what he puts out, especially after. I think The Mandalorian was actually one of my favorite endings.
It was really good, and
You know what
that
I mean?
that scene with the 2 stormtroopers was a very Taika Waititi thing to do. You heard me say it already, but I think that's legitimately one of the best dialogues in the entire franchise. Is just those 2 stormtroopers sitting there trying to figure out what to do with Baby Yoda. Legitimately funny, without ruining the
Yeah,
tone of
and
everything. Get out of here, cat.
and probably one of the funniest things about it is it does take cracks on Star Wars itself.
Yes.
Like some of the bad guys are almost cartoonishly villain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he was capitalizing on that. Like they're joking around about how this guy has. It's like should we like try to call him again? I don't know. He just killed a stormtrooper for interrupting his monologue. you know,
Yeah.
and so they're. I don't know. It was just a brilliant dialogue. I loved it. I hope to see more of it.
I agree. That guy's a gem. I really want to see that movie Jojo Rabbit, but at the same time, I don't. like, The parody that he did.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to see that.
I didn't like the way that it
Does
was
look pretty funny,
marketed.
but
Um, yeah, I don't know, but
from what I saw, it looked...
marketing's different. Go ahead.
Just talk at the same time. Keep it going.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
No, from what I saw, it looked pretty adult, but I don't know how to feel about it, because I think trolling is wrong, but it brings up the great moral dilemma. Is trolling Hitler wrong? Because that's essentially why he made the movie. You know, he like said that's pretty much why he starred in the movie. You know, because he plays Hitler.
Yeah.
And when asked why, he was just like, I don't think anything would make Hitler more mad than being played by someone who is, forget what ethnicity he is, but
Yeah, I can't tell.
Hitler wasn't big on ethnicities, including his.
That's true.
You know, and so it's like he looks nothing like Hitler did, and the point of that is literally just to make fun of Hitler.
Yep.
So yeah, it's an interesting movie, interesting concept.
Gosh, we're losing. Yeah, we lost very badly. Rude.
Yeah, it's probably my bad considering I'm 14th on the scoreboard.
You know what? That just means there were 5 people below you, so let's blame it on those ones.
Speaking of The Mandalorian, though, because I did actually want to talk about that. So it's going to be a weird segue because I'm going to kind of give you whiplash here. But did you hear The Mandalorian has been dethroned? I've seen so many articles that, you know, Mandalorian was the #1 rated, most ratings are generated through viewership. And The Mandalorian has just been dethroned by The Witcher. The Witcher is #1. It's the best show. You know what Netflix didn't release? The viewer statistics.
Okay.
How can it have a #1 rating when the statistics websites that are responsible for generating the rating are open about not having the statistics to generate it? It is literally just headlines. I feel like it's on some level like bought and paid for headlines, because I was skeptical of The Witcher being #1
Yeah, especially since it had such bad ratings. Well,
hmm
from reviewers,
When
a
there
really
was-
high audience rating. Sorry, go ahead.
when it was a show that had so much nudity in it. And I'll cover this more. I have a video I'll eventually release. I'm having to reformat it now to include this topic. R-rated movies and shows never do as well as something that hits that sort of PG-13 range. You know, Stranger Things is a good example because they were #1 on the charts for 3 seasons in a row. And it hit that nice sort of, your young adults can watch it, your adults can watch it, your teenagers can watch it, maybe not your kids,
Right.
you know, but it appeals to a wide audience. But as soon as you throw that mature or R or adult rating, because that's really where The Witcher would fall into. It's an adult rating. It's got more than one nude scene per show.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of curious why it would be an outlier, and I just assumed that it would be because of the fact that The Witcher is a show that has a huge following elsewhere. You know, it's got books, books, games, and an international audience. The author actually isn't from America. He didn't first publish in America. He had it
Right.
translated after it grew popular in America.
Mhm.
And I was thinking maybe these factors played into it. What I wasn't expecting upon further research was Netflix never released the viewer statistics for it. They're basing it off of how many people watched the first 2 minutes of it.
You kidding me?
Yep. I'd say. So typically when they take the statistics, they take, like YouTube does. You know, YouTube will generate statistics based on watch time, you know, and that's sort of how they've changed their monetization as well. They don't count you as generating interest if people just clicked on you and then didn't watch you.
Mhm.
And so now they keep up with your watch time. If you want to be a YouTube partner, you have to have a certain amount of hours watched,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. Um, and that's typically similar to what they do to generate show ratings. So they will take into account how many people checked it out, because that's sort of what they count as a metric of interest, as well as how much social media engagement it has. And then they will do what's called weighting, where some factors are counted more than others. Like social media engagement, obviously, is going to be counted less than how many people watched the show. You know, that seems fairly commonsensical. You can just sort of absentmindedly like The Witcher because, you know, maybe you like the game, like the books, and have no interest in checking out the show or paying a subscription just to watch it.
Mhm.
And so the actual statistics of sitting down and watching the show would be rated higher on the statistics without, well, it would be rated higher than any other factor. And since they didn't have those, it skewed the results.
Gotcha.
They had how many people checked out the first 2 minutes. And to be honest, they weren't open with how explicit it was going to be. You know,
Oh yeah.
like
They said it would
like
be.
most of the
It wouldn't shy
advertising.
away from stuff, but like that was pretty heavy. Like they quite gratuitous.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so and they also didn't release how they weighted it, if that makes sense. So trying to find words, man. Words are hard. You would expect without those statistics that they just wouldn't put in for, they wouldn't give the show a rating at all, because you can't generate a statistical comparison, which is what ratings are, without the statistics. But
Right.
instead, they generated some sort of new one, but they didn't say how they rated the individual components, which I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked to have seen if it, if the ratings are as high because it had high engagement on social media, which it has. You know, a lot of people have
Yeah.
posted articles about it. It's been getting interest outside of the normal circles because it's more known as a game and a book series than most franchises.
Wow, we saved that game by one character.
Yeah, I saw that. That was crazy. And you would expect that since they were drawing from different statistics, they would give a breakdown on how they measured the statistics, but they never did follow up with that. And I have a sneaky suspicion that they weighted the social media engagement higher than they normally would have, or something along those lines, to try and generate a statistic as opposed to even using how many people watch the first 2 minutes of it is still kind of
It's pretty-
inaccurate to how many people made it past like the first episode like you would get out of other shows, you know?
And if you think about it, there is motivation for them doing that, not just because it's their show against another show, but it's Netflix against the brand new God King of streaming services. They
Oh, yeah,
want to maintain their
Netflix
relevance.
has been Netflix has been struggling, didn't they? They've been failing on meeting their quota for like every quarter this year.
I don't know anything
Um,
about that. I just know that anybody who has a brain has to understand that Netflix is taking a serious hit with Disney Plus coming out.
They were struggling before Disney Plus came
Right.
out,
Right.
is what I'm getting at. They had overinvested in a certain number of shows, and because they had overinvested and not gotten the revenue they expected, I think they're technically in debt right now. Um, so they need a big win, and they needed a big win out of the Witcher series. And so they are motivated if those statistics aren't what they had hoped. They're absolutely motivated to not say what they were, you know. I'm not going to accuse them of paying off the ratings companies. The ratings companies are, you know, they're making money
Freaking door
by
bugs me in.
getting clicks and basically generating news. So, they don't have to be paid by the company to be incentivized to provide, a news article that, hey, there's a new number one. It's kind of like almost clickbait, you know, and stuff like that. It's the same driving motivation there. And yeah, so I think it's one of those things where the hype for The Witcher is kind of artificially generated by selfish interest more than actual professionalism in the industry. Um, and I think this is backed by. This would be such an outlier, you know what I mean, in the film industry to be really the only mature rated, rated R film show production that can even come close to competing with shows that are produced more modestly for a younger, and not just younger, but more modest audience. Not everyone is acceptant and tolerant of that. That's actually something that we've been discussing with each other lately because, we want to like The Witcher.
Yeah.
The main character is intriguing. He has a good story. I think overall he is. When you take the story and break it down to its most sort of basic story level and take out, the gratuitous character flaws, the sex scenes,
Yeah.
then he would be a good character. He's a character who is discriminated against, yet refuses to take out the frustration and anger he has towards people on people. Instead, he still protects them, even though it's a thankless job, and there's not really any reward to it for him. And I'm just gonna discuss the plot just a little bit. He does end up in a situation where it's not his child. He doesn't, have like an illegitimate child or anything, but he is responsible for a child. And you see him, because he's a Witcher, because he faces this discrimination, you see him try to give the child the best possible future.
Yeah.
And then later, he comes back to save the child because he was, keeping up with some of what was going on, and he knew that things were not as good as he would have hoped for that child. And it's like, well, that story is an interesting story, and a story I want to keep up with, especially in a story where you have magic and monsters and all of this really cool lore and stuff going on. And it's like, so on that level we want to like it, but it's like, can we as Christians justify watching it when it's got all of this gratuitous stuff in it, this fan service, some people would call it.
Yeah. I'm still, just for clarity's sake, I think it's pretty obvious that we can't justify watching that specific content. I think the thing that sticks out in my brain is, and this might sound like kind of a defeatist attitude towards the entire subject, but all that stuff is on a spectrum in our culture. Like, you can't watch TV without receiving some dose of advertising or propaganda about or involving sexuality. Certainly, if you're going to actually watch TV or movies, so just like there's, I think a good example would be like Braveheart. Like, that's a pretty universally beloved movie, pretty highly lauded for a lot of its, like, what's the word? I've heard sermons about that movie, like that sort of thing, where people draw from those stories because it's a timeless tale of sacrifice and choosing what's right over what's easy. Pretty aggressive sex scene at one point in that movie, and so most believers will either skip those things or look away from those things when that happens, and I think that's a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. The question that we were kind of talking about was like, okay, assuming that we're skipping these things, like, is that even something that we should we be supporting this as an enterprise or something like that, or should we treat it like human relationships where we're just like, okay, you're just gonna intake some garbage with everything, you're gonna have to acknowledge some garbage that you don't approve of. Does that mean that you're supposed to write off the entire thing altogether? I don't know. I still don't know. I can't recommend it. There's certain movies that, I think aren't perfect and they have some content that I don't approve of that I still feel okay recommending. The Witcher is not one of those. I can't recommend somebody be like, yeah, just skip the scenes, because I don't want to say most, but there are very many people who are like, yeah, I'm just going to skip it. And as soon as that first nipple crosses the screen, they're not going to skip it. Like, they either get swept up in the temptation, or maybe they're even slightly looking forward to that because of the flesh, or whatever you want to call it, because of sin. Yeah.
We mean the flesh as in your desire, not, I feel like that would be a weird way of describing.
Double meaning. The flesh on the screen.
The flesh, wink, wink.
Yeah. And that's oftentimes a big thing.
No,
I've always been relatively, and I say this like carefully, but I've been relatively successful against any. I've never had a pornography issue. Saw it a couple times when I was a kid, and pretty quickly dealt with it and like made sure that that wasn't going to be an issue at that point. I've never really got into porn, and I'm relatively disciplined at looking away from those things. But I feel like not because I'm special, but I feel like that kind of trait is kind of like a unicorn. You don't see that a lot. I think most people have a much harder time doing that. So I don't want to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, man, just skip the scenes and then end up leading somebody into a situation or influencing them in any towards a way towards sin, which is pretty obviously sin because pornography is universally evil in every sense of the word. So yeah, I don't want to condone
Yeah.
something that's going to draw them into temptation.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is probably something we will come back to and flesh out, you know, over and over again because each case is different. I think one that I would use, like, as an example, almost, I don't know what I would use as a good example, but there are some movies where they have clear indicators before
Yeah.
the scene happens, or maybe the scenes start covered, and the, cool, cool, and then move their way to more of the fan service type stuff. But I think where the point I was bringing up was just that statistically speaking, there are going to be a lot of people who are not okay with that content. Um, and I think there is on some level, I don't know. I think that yes, scene skipping is a good practice, or paying for, there are some services coming out where they filter and edit for you. And I think those are good practices.
Voodoo has a feature on a lot of
But
movies where it does that now. Kind of surprised me that all of a
mhm,
sudden that showed up.
yeah,
I need to play something
but I think
else.
with The
I'm getting burned out
Witcher,
on this game right now. It's just chaos while we're
yeah,
talking.
no, that's fair. It has been a lot more hectic tonight. Are you feeling another two-player game, or are you gonna do your thing and
I'm neutral, honestly. Um, I just know that as we're talking, I'm having a hard time focusing and I'm playing like garbage, so I don't know how viewable it is. I'll get a hero and then I'll accidentally rush into a crowd of people. Ooh. I could be talked into running around the map on Anthem.
Oh yeah, sure.
Cool. It's pretty. Continue.
But yeah, we will probably continuously bring up that topic and discuss it in more depth. I don't want to seem like we're avoiding it or not giving a definitive answer on it. Just because I'm circling it back around to the ratings. But I think that you're safe in assuming that The Mandalorian is the number one most watched show, period.
Yeah.
As far as any streaming service goes, because they have not they have not shown any evidence to the contrary. Most ratings are generated off of statistics that are given to a company that runs these statistics through a program that weights them based on different factors, and they'll investigate, the social media and search engine statistics on it and stuff like that. And since they didn't get the most important statistic, the viewer statistics, I think that there's no way you can definitively say that The Witcher is number one. You know, there's no evidence to support that. And that would fit in line with the statistics that you always see for any mature rated content. Like we were joking about the fact that The Joker is a huge success. It's the number one R rated movie that has ever existed. And it just got creamed by the minions. You know?
Yeah.
Gonna look up real quick how much the Joker made.
Right. Yep.
And then you're muted, by the way.
How am I muted? No. I'm not muted. Can you hear me now? What the heck? I'm definitely not muted. How about now? Can you hear me now? Well, that's not good. Nothing? Nothing? Oh, this is awkward.
So yeah. Most. Oh, says you joined the party.
Can you hear me now? Nothing? You can't hear me at all, Mitchell? It's not my mic. Hold on, I'm gonna message.
I cannot hear your audio. Looks like you're attempting to talk. Actually, that appears to be on my end. I cannot hear any audio.
Uh-oh. Scrub. Unplug, replug.
Could you hear me when I was talking?
Yeah, I could hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Cool. So, yeah, I looked it up, and the Joker is still only the 32nd highest grossing film.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, one thing to note about that is that films will always generate more revenue as time goes on, just because there's more people, as well as more, typically more wealth in the world as time goes on, innovation happens and stuff. But the fact that it's a newer movie and it was unable to compete with what is literally just children's movies coming out really highlights, I think, on some level, the, I guess, disconnect. But I don't know if I want to call it disconnect. Just the fact that R-rated movies are never competitive with others is something I find interested in. The fact that they're pushing for mature content is where there's disconnect.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The only thing is like somebody else has to have recognized like, hey, these things make less money. The only thing that I could think is not the only thing, I guess, but the easiest thing for me to think of is ideological slants, and then also just desire. I mean, I'm sure that there's a few and far between. You'll run into a director or a creator who wants the quote unquote artistic integrity, where they actually believe in the work that they're doing, which
Hmm.
obviously gets tied into ideology in a lot of cases. Because for some reason, people seem to have a genuine belief that it's productive to human society to like have people pretend to have sex and um, in front of everybody, because for some reason they think that's a positive experience for humankind, is a weird voyeurism. And despite
Hmm.
every empirical study and every psychological study on the effects of the human brain and the effects of our thought processes and the way that we view people being completely tainted by any and all of that, for some reason they think it's still a good idea.
Hmm.
I changed my suit the other day when I was just solo playing. Looks sick. Look like a ninja.
Have you loaded in yet? Just because I've loaded in and I do not
Yep.
see you.
I'm coming
Yep.
to you.
Oh, you show up on my screen now. But yeah, I still need to change my color scheme. I ended up changing my color scheme on PC, but never got around to doing it here.
Uh-huh.
So, I kind of don't like how mine looks. I don't know what color it actually is, but it just looks kind of
Seems like gray and
brown
blue to me.
on my screen.
Hmm.
Well, the blue's from his arms glow.
That's right.
And they
Yeah.
glow blue as well. Yeah, so a lot of people have taken to doing his color scheme as this sort of like cyan color to match the glow
Mm-hmm.
that I think has actually been cool. But it looks like I'm just brown. I don't know why. I don't think I would have put on brown.
I see. Ooh, I just had a strong desire for a cape. Because my character feels like a hunter, but for some reason, no capes.
Yeah, that's something I hope when they release new content, which I hope they're still planning on doing, that they give us more aesthetic changes. And it's so funny because so this game was never pay to win, but you
Right.
know, it is another EA game that garnered several complaints. And for some reason, one of the complaints was that there was not enough aesthetic microtransactions, which is funny because they just got blasted over Apex is more popular, so they decided to, I guess, take the complaints from there and put them. Sorry, the complaints from here and put them into there, and they added tons of cosmetics, and that's basically just all the game is about right now.
Okay.
And it got like blasted. They're like, what are these microtransactions doing here?
This is what you wanted.
On
Are you-
some level, this is why it is, I think, an honest suggestion to tell game developers to just ignore their fans.
Yeah.
Because the fans honestly are often unaware of what they want. If you go into a game just trying to create a fun experience, a fun story, and, just art, something that's beautiful and can be appreciated, you're going to make a profit. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
Gamers have been really spoiled by a lot of these MMOs and RPG-like games that constantly add on content. They feel like they need more and more to be satisfied, and people have actually done studies where they've looked at the amount of content that people are receiving now and comparing it to the amount of content that they were previously. And people will actually complain that it's not enough content that they're receiving now, and it's more content than what they previously received and praised in the past.
I think
So
it's
it's
that's definitely a lot to do with the fact that games are now games as services almost universally. Like even Jedi Fallen Order, like a few minutes ago, I was saying how I want more. I'm like, give us more stuff to do on a regular basis, because back in the day, it used to be once you beat a game, you're like, yeah, I beat it, I conquered it, it's over, and then maybe you would come back in a year and play it again or something. But nowadays, it's like, oh, I beat it. Now time for the end games content, and that's just the name of the game.
yeah, but I feel like with Fallen Order, because it was a single player game that was really just focused on campaign, they made their revenue. They didn't get burnout on it.
Oh, for
They
sure.
put it out and it was out, and they did some stuff with it, but they didn't have to, you know. They made all the profit and revenue that they're going to make off of it. And I think you will have more people satisfied with your game if you produce a game for the story, because that is what's satisfying about it. It had good gameplay, good story.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't something that people love for any form of end game content. There literally is none other than like some exploration type stuff. Things people would complain about having to do in an MMO.
Yeah.
So
Speaking
I
of
just find it
MMOs,
interesting. I'm wondering.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm wondering if there is. If it's going to be something where in the future there's this model of just PvE being the main focus, and not just the main focus, but
We gotta get out of here. These guys are one-shotting the crap out of us. Just fly away.
Yep, yep.
Ooh, I just got shot down. Oh, overheated.
It's because he hit you with fire.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm just wondering if the single player campaign model is going to come back.
I think so. I think this game was the nail in the coffin for that whole thing that I'm pretty sure that was EA that said that too, wasn't it? That nobody wants to play single player games anymore. Obviously we had a lot of like real time examples there. Everybody was like, hey, The Witcher 3, hey, Titanfall 2, other games that I can't think of at the moment, and then Fallen Order came out and they're just like, yep, okay, oh, Last of Us, Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn, the Uncharted series, like all these games are really popular single player games, so we already had a whole bunch of stuff and examples that we could draw from to show, okay, that was just a dumb thing to say. And then after they said it, the game that everybody said they wanted ends up being amazingly popular. So I think that was definitely, like I said, the nail in the coffin against that whole wrong-headed argument or position. So I think we'll see a lot more of that just simply because they tested it and it worked. They were proven wrong. And they were
So,
proven wrong with a lot of money, so they want to make more money, obviously.
hmm so we're definitely gonna make no progress here because I just
Yeah, same
hit
thing.
them with my super, and it didn't even take their shields down completely.
Selfish. Ooh, they're shooting at us.
I wish on some level it were easier to keep up with people, but the map is so large that it's actually difficult. I feel like maybe the characters need to be larger, but when you start, then you start fighting titans and you think the character should be smaller.
Dude, this game makes me
Um,
want like a legit, like fully invested in Avatar game from the James Cameron movie Avatar. Because this like feels a
yeah,
lot like it. If they were to just like lean fully into that and get you like in a fully explorable world like this in the Avatar setting, oh my gosh.
it would, I think, have to be done during one of their other like great times of trouble, but before people came along,
Oh yeah.
because I think you're limited in your options um when you have this sort of people versus aliens kind of setup. I feel like I don't know. I feel like Avatar does better as a movie than it would as a game, but I really love the aesthetics. I think I do like the idea of Anthem. I like being able to fly and have these, powers and abilities. I feel like it just needs a little bit of polishing to captivate me long term. I think as it stands now, it stands where it was, a year ago, where I'll play it, I'll enjoy it, I have a lot of good things to say about it, but it really just needs a little bit more
Hmm.
before it becomes like my go-to game.
Yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, I love the environment, and that's why I want an Avatar game. So if they made it like around like exploration and scenery, like you could literally just like do a screw around game where like, okay, like my job is to go hunt in the forest, and they like draw
That
elements
would
from like
actually
Monster
be
Hunter World, like without just copying it, but just like have elements of that. Like, hey, we need to go on a hunt, we need to go uh, find a banshee, bond with it, and learn how to fly it. And then maybe it escalates into like tribal warfare later on. So there's like PvP, or just like combat. Oh, there's so much they could do with it. They would just need to not have it set on any sort of movie timeline. Just let them make the game and make it right. Could be so super good.
Yeah, and I think I do prefer the aesthetics there a little better than the aesthetics here because even in the area where they have bioluminescence and mushrooms and a little bit of jungle, it's not nearly closed in enough, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
I think this is too open of a map,
yep.
and I do think that it also looks better when it's not winter, because their winter changes are still in effect. I really
I'm ready for it to go
love
away now.
its.
I keep wanting to see
Mhm.
just the jungle.
I'd say it's a little clearer. You know, the red is green instead. There's not constant snow. Um, yeah, it's just there's a lot more foliage in some areas. And yeah, I really like it. I think that winter events work better in uglier games. I feel like that's really rude to say, but snow is really beautiful, but the aesthetic is really one-dimensional. And so when it comes down to it, you do want. Oh wow, what just hit me?
That hurts.
I'm
Lightning.
dying.
There's lightning up there that was zapping me. Ooh, you're down.
You're not gonna be able to res me. Yeah, I'm just respawning.
Wanna resin, but it's over, mate. Oh man,
Wow.
who's coming in? We gotta get away.
But yeah, man, just pretty games is honestly where it's at. And I feel like that's something that people haven't been attempting to do lately. And it's because you make a game with a lot of good visuals, either you put a ton of artwork into the game, like it was a struggle to produce on your artist, or it's outside of what you can really expect from this generation of gaming console, because it does take a lot to texturalize all of this scenery, the trees and stuff like that, your graphics card. It either, or like the wind impulses, I think is a good one here, because most of the trees are just sort of artwork in the background, and then like here, close up to you, you can tell which trees are moving and which ones aren't. So you kind of end up in this nice little halfway point where it feels like a really big immersive environment, but not everything is actually stressing your graphics card as much as it possibly could. I feel like there's probably a better way to phrase that. But yeah, let us know down in the comments if you have any suggestions for what we should discuss next. We kind of got off the topic of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the only thing we had left to talk about were the movies, anyways. So I don't
And
think we're
that could be
losing
its-
too much content there.
I think there's enough there that we could do an entire stream just on the movies.
Well, I think it depends on how in depth we want to go with it.
Oh, I
Because
want to get real deep.
I think the way to pull that off is, one, I need to go and rewatch a bunch of Star Wars movies, because honestly, some of them are so far. It's been so long, I don't remember what I like and dislike about them. And it would be nice to investigate those. But we would also have to talk about some of their future projects, which we touched on some of them here. They're looking to investigate, the Old Republic as a show, and we can discuss what they should do, what they shouldn't do. So I could see there being a lot of content there.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe we'll go ahead and do streams of Knights of the Old Republic, and then once we're done with our streams of Knights of the Old Republic, we will do our streams of the movies. Well, not of the movies, but about, what they should be looking to do in the next movies that they produce.
I think that's a good idea. So I think we should try to wipe out this group of mobs and then wrap up the stream. And I think I still want to play
Yep.
something, but I don't know how to invest in the storyline of anything that we're playing while we're talking at the same time. So I'm just kind of dinking around still.
Yeah, no. It's fair to cut a stream when you run out of content. Like I was saying, we want to be engaging with our audience and give them something to watch of value. And since most people enjoy the commentary, enjoy the discussion, and I think on some level, a lot of people who watch streams honestly are looking for engagement they might not get elsewhere. Which is why I love when people comment, because we can really engage with people, and maybe they need it, and it's nice to maybe be of assistance, and if not, then it's still nice to socialize with people and talk to new people on stream.
Amen. I don't really know what I'm doing other than just killing monsters. Wait,
That's pretty much it.
are these guys the monsters, or are we?
I don't know. I don't think we've gotten that far in the story yet. Imagine they flip that on you. Like, you play a game, you think you're the good guy, and then it's like
You're
halfway
the
through,
invaders.
you get some like dialogue action. Are we the baddies?
Could be bad. Alright, cool. With that, I'm going to end the stream. Thanks for watching, guys. Good night. I have been Markham. This has been Arcane, and we are out.